if you have the right people, then they have the vision to be able to execute against the process. And I think, so one thing that jumped in my mind around that is there's a balance, right? Because you want to have the right people, but you also can't rely exclusively on people and have it all in their mind, such that if that person wins the lottery and is gone, now we don't know how to do the process.
How is it going, ladies and gentlemen? This is Sean Barnes. I want to welcome you back to The Way of the Wolf. Our guest today is a lady named Julie Thyne. She is the Global Improvement Director for DOW. We've actually known each other for a couple of years, sat on some panels, had some incredible conversations at various operational excellence events. Finally, we were able to get our schedules to align to have her come into the studio and share some of her experiences around operational excellence and continuous improvement. Julie, welcome to The Way of the Wolf.
Thanks. I am excited to be here. Always fun to talk to you about these things.
I know. It's interesting. I think probably 2 or 3 years ago, we sat on a panel together and I thought, well, okay, she's impressive. She knows her stuff. This is it. And then just in subsequent years, we just kept having more conversations and bumping into each other. And so, yeah, I'm thrilled that we have the opportunity to talk about this. So DOW for 26 years. First of all, before we dive into all of this stuff, how has it been working for an organization of that size for that long?
Honestly, I mean, clearly I love it. I'm still there, right? And I feel like I'm maybe kind of the last of that generation that wanted to join a company and make a career out of it. When I joined DOW, I had every intention of retiring from DOW. I still have every intention of retiring from DOW. They've been great to me in terms of the opportunities that I've been given, but I am just so proud and so privileged to work for a company that values people and values inclusion and values our environments. I mean, we've got some pretty bold goals out there around decarbonization and around inclusion, and it just makes me really excited to continue to work for a company that does those things.
All right. So, yep, we're just going to go ahead and dive into this because everything that you just shared gets me excited. These are the topics that we usually cover. Now, one thing that I have observed over the years is it seems that everything that you just cited becomes increasingly challenging at scale. DOW is a big company. How many employees do you guys have, roughly?
38,000.
Okay, so how does an organization of that size continue to focus on everything that you just talked about?
So it's really about culture and the way that we've built our DOW culture. It's interesting because I've been a part of DOW for 26 years, but I've also had the privilege to be part of some of the mergers and acquisitions that we have taken part in. And so I've gotten to see some of those cultures in other companies as well. And one thing that's really unique about DOW, I think, is our ability to push that culture across our entire enterprise. So if I'm in my plant in Freeport, Texas, and then I go to a plant in Midland, Michigan, and then I go to a plant in Stade, Germany, and then I go to a plant in Maptaput, Thailand, I find the same culture. I mean, there's regional differences and things like that, but you find the same underlying work processes. We speak the same acronym-laden DOW language, and that's really, I think, that's what brings us to be able to have those enterprise-wide initiatives. And then I just have to give our leadership a lot of credit. I've seen multiple leaders over my 26 years. I'm thrilled with the leadership that we have right now and the values that they bring, but there's a very consistent message from the top of the company that we cascade down around those values and what's important and holding people accountable to those. And I think that's how we're able to do these things at enterprise level.
So, I mean, it clearly comes down to the values of leadership. And a lot of my experiences in the upstream oil and gas space, highly acquisitive. I have no doubt, or I'm quite certain DOW is also acquisitive. And what I've always found to be interesting is that when a company ends up being acquired and being brought into the fold, there's obviously going to be initiatives and projects around the integration, the back office systems, ERP, HR, payroll, all of that stuff, IT systems, everything like that. And I've come to realize, or at least in my perspective, that's the easy stuff. It's the people and the culture and assimilating them into your culture that is the most challenging aspect of an acquisition and an integration and growth to, I would say, a lesser extent. But whenever you have that organic growth, it's slower and more controlled than big bang. We've got 500 more employees that we have to contend with. And so have you been a part of integration efforts over the years, and have you seen that in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the privilege to be a part of multiple integrations, very big ones, as well as some that weren't as large, and from different takes on it as well. So the true acquisition integration, but also the merger of equals integration. So I've taken part in a number of those, and it's interesting because I've watched our approach change over the years. I can think of one in particular where we went in with a pretty heavy hand, and we were like, "This is DOW culture. You're going to do DOW culture." We were still very compliance focused, and we integrated quite a lot with that group. And I remember one of them telling me a few years later, he said, "Julie, we're more DOW than DOW," because they took it on. They realized, if I want my job, I got to do this. Then later we came back around and we were like, well, maybe that was a little bit too much. And so we've had other times where we said, well, we're not gonna go as hard on the culture piece, and we're gonna kind of let that culture do its thing and see where that takes us. And so we've swung the pendulum, and I hope that we're not really doing mergers and acquisitions at the moment, but I hope that we've kind of found that sweet spot of being intentional about bringing that culture and bringing them into the family, but also not making it seem like we are the tyrant overtaking them. One of the things that we've done in order to establish that culture is we are very intentional about our integration of people. So it's bringing DOW people into the new acquired company, but it's also encouraging those people from the acquired facilities to come and join heritage DOW sites and get a chance to experience what it's like to work in a company that's been part of DOW for or a plant that's been part of DOW for 127 years. What is that like? I had actually the opportunity to be a first DOW person, a DOW leader for one of the acquired plants that we had. And I went in to be the site leader of that and got to navigate that whole integration experience, which was really unique.
It's so much fun.
It was.
I don't know if I'm a glutton for punishment. I love integrations. And, I think maybe because I do enjoy a good challenge, and I enjoy the opportunity to look at all of these individual little worlds and then pick and choose the best from each to roll them up into something great. And I want to dive in a little bit deeper on the people element of it, and then also the pendulum that you talked about, because there is very much a pendulum, and every acquisition is going to be unique, and that sometimes you have to take a little bit more of a heavy-handed approach to get them there, and other times you can just there's a natural alignment that exists that just makes it so easy. So the ability to quickly walk in, size the situation up, size the employee population up, get a sense of where their heads are at as a collective, but also taking the time to meet with all of the key leaders, but then also a few rungs down, it's very time consuming. But it gives you that opportunity to have a more holistic understanding of what's going on across the broader organization to put a better plan in place. So those are some of the things that I absolutely love about it. But when it comes to the integration of the people, what has been the most challenging aspect of that in your experiences?
I mean, I think the challenge is just it's change, right? And then the human response to change is to fear it and to reject it. And so, being that first leader that comes in and says, "Hey, welcome to DOW, and by the way, here's all these, here's your new job title. We've realigned probably your pay grades. Everything that you knew previously. There's a lot of differences now, and so finding a way to have those conversations." In a psychologically safe way, takes, just like you said, it takes time and it takes effort. For me personally, my leadership style has a high degree of empathy. I want to get to know the people. I want to spend time out on the shop floor. I mean, some of that's the lean leader in me. I like to go to the Gemba. I like to see where the work happens. But I feel that way with people as well. And so, as when I was a production leader for our plants and a site leader, I spent a ton of time in our control rooms and just walking through our processes and watching people do work because I wanted to get to know them as people. I always had this philosophy of I don't want to, as a leader, I don't want to ask you to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. Now, maybe there were some things I physically couldn't do myself. I just wasn't, strong enough to open that rail car up. But if I wasn't willing to climb up there and wear the same PPE you were wearing, then why on earth would I ask you to do it? So, I think it applies in integration situations or in any sort of a leadership situation is just, spending time with the people and getting to know them as people.
I think it's also a delicate balance of, yes, you have to get to know the people. You have to take the time and invest time in getting to know the people, but also you have to have an element of structure whenever it comes to managing change. If you come in and say, hey, we're going to integrate this stuff and y'all figure it out, that doesn't inspire confidence and it's just going to create more confusion and chaos. But if you come in and say, here's the plan, here's where we're going, and then you back into it, and like, we have to do this by this date, we have to do this by this date, just the fact that there is structure inspires confidence. And then when you combine that with someone like yourself coming in, sitting down, taking the time to understand, and then listening to what they have to say, because there is a very real possibility that you come in and lay out this new process that this company has tried before and it doesn't work. And if you try to force it and say, this is the DOW way, it doesn't work. What happens is they fall in line because they want to keep their job. The whole thing blows up just like they said it would, and then they lose confidence in leadership, and then it just starts to unravel from there. And so taking the time to get to know the people and then being willing to adapt. Yes, there's guardrails that you have to operate within to conform to the new company's ways, but as long as you can go anywhere you need to within those guardrails and make sure that, we're going to adapt this process a little bit, you get more buy-in, you get more trust, and it makes it that much easier.
Yeah, there's a line you have to walk between the going fast, because that's what you want to do, right? We want to recognize all those synergies. We want to get all of that good cost savings and productivity improvements and everything that we think we can get from this. But then there's also the balancing that with the go slow to go fast, just like you're describing, right? As a new leader going into a facility, your first thought shouldn't be, what am I going to change? Your first thought should be, where can I meet people? Where can I listen? And just taking that time to watch and learn and see how things flow currently before you just start going in and making radical changes. I think that's really important. And it takes a balancing act. And especially if you are feeling that accountability of, well, gosh, I have to deliver these synergy targets. I have to deliver whatever, being willing to be courageous and push back a little bit and say, give me a couple weeks to watch and learn before I start, really making these massive changes. I understand it's there, but let's do it in a way that makes sense. So you don't get that backslide like you're describing. You don't have people that are just blindly complying to save their job, but not feeling it and believing it.
Yeah, if they don't buy in, you're setting yourself up for disaster down the road, right? Whenever it comes to any change, there's going to be a cost to that change. And that cost could be a tremendous amount of pain today that pays off on the back end, or less pain today that ends up creating a nightmare on the back end. And sometimes you don't know the gravity of the situation. And so taking that time and being comfortable pushing back, because that is something that a lot of managers and people focused on integrations, they struggle with, because once again, they're fearful of losing their job. But I have found that if you stand your ground and know what you're talking about and then provide updates along the way, that will usually inspire confidence with the senior leaders, because they know, okay, well, Julie's working through this and maybe we're not quite on target, but she has a plan and I'm comfortable with that plan, and I'm going to do everything I can to support her and her team through these initiatives.
Having a good communication strategy, change management strategy is so important. And thinking about in that communication strategy, who are your stakeholders? Because your communication strategy isn't just the people that I'm now working with, right? The acquired plant that I need to go in and communicate to. It's also just like you're describing. It's communicating up. It's letting the leadership know, hey, this is what's happening, and here's the milestones that we're working towards, and we're getting close, or here's what's happening, because it's all about credibility. At that point, you have that potential to push back and make good choices, but you have to build that credibility by being open with that communication.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about operational excellence and continuous improvement and lean and all these big words. Have you always been in the role that you are in today? What does that look like, and what do these terms mean to you?
So no, I haven't always been in this role. I started out actually in our environmental reporting group. I managed a portion of what was back then our 2005 goals. We're on 2035 goals now. And I came up through a bunch of different opportunities. I worked in our pharmaceuticals division when we had one. I worked in our automotive division. I worked in our, I ran a hazardous waste incinerator for a few years, went out to electronic materials for a few years. So I've kind of been all over. Every time I moved, I went to a different business unit, not by design. It was just by good luck, I like to say. But then I found myself in this operational excellence. The group name has changed a bit. I've actually been in this group for almost 9 years now, which is pretty crazy, but it's the best job in the company. I mean, honestly, I adore what I do, and I can't imagine doing anything different right now. But when I think about the terms, right, operational excellence, continuous improvement, lean, what do these really mean? And I think that it's operational excellence is about just the relentless pursuit of efficiency and quality and continuously improving what we do. And lean is a tool that can get us there, right? Lean is a great series of tools that you can have in your toolbox and a mindset you can use. But there's other mindsets as well. And for me, continuous improvement is about how do I get better today than I was yesterday. It's about small wins. It's about pushing forward. It's about challenging that status quo and not being satisfied with where I am. It doesn't necessarily mean large capital project. It doesn't necessarily mean significant change in headcount, either positive or negative. It can be those little things. It can just be about how can I be a little bit better than I was yesterday.
Do you find that some leaders are resistant to this entire concept and think, well, this is the way we've always done it. This works fantastic. Have you experienced that?
Obviously, there's pockets of that right now, and my hesitation is because right now we're sort of in this space where we have leaders asking for continuous improvement. So my mind is like, no, everybody loves continuous improvement, but of course, there's always times where it's been where there's been some resistance to it. And it's interesting. The reason why we're in this space right now is because there was previously some resistance to it. Currently, we're in a space where we are investing in our decarbonize and grow strategy, which means we have some big projects and some big aspirations out there. And that's where our capital is going, is into these big projects that are going to decarbonize and grow our company. But what it means is anybody who's not part of the big project, now they're struggling a little bit because they're like, well, I don't have my capital budget anymore. It's all with this other project. So what do I do? How do I keep getting better? Because I still have to keep squeezing those extra pounds out of assets that are getting older. And I still have to deal with the challenges of a changing workforce and all these things. So they're coming now and saying, we need more continuous improvement. All that time when we said we were happy without it because we had capital, now we really want continuous improvement. What do you have for us? So it's been, for me anyway, it's been a great shift because it's what I'm passionate about. And I get to do a lot of talking about continuous improvement and teaching the newer engineers coming into the company about this toolbox that they can use. So I'm not sure I answered your question there, but maybe we came back around to something.
So a lot of things, well, one of the big things that comes to mind for me is going through mapping out all of the business processes, eliminating waste, streamlining processes. That is a big component of this conversation that we're talking about. There is another big component, and that is the people. Do you find you spending more time on the people or on the process side of things?
It is a mixture for sure. For me personally, I spend a lot of time on the process side of things. Just because I bring an expertise that if we have a particular challenge with the process that is, giving us some difficulties and they need somebody who can come in and really guide a value stream mapping session or the ability to look at it with a fresh set of eyes or a set of eyes that's seen a lot of different things across the company, I will get called in and asked to facilitate these kinds of sessions. So those are often very process focused, right? What do? We do this step, we do this step, we do this step. But what's interesting is it's hard to even take process and people apart because what ultimately drives the process is the people. And so, as I'm thinking and talking at the same time, yes, I start with the process, but it often comes down to, well, the people that support the process, because my very favorite diagram to make is a swim lane diagram, which melds people and process, right? The people on one side, process across the middle, and we look and see what those connectivities are. So it's hard to take the two apart.
That is such a beautiful response. And I don't want to say it was a trick question, but you answered that beautifully. That's exactly where my head is at, right? And whenever I do sit on panels and have conversations at various events, and I always enjoy the questions that inevitably come at the end, whether they're flashed up on a screen or they're raising their hands. Because there's so many different problems that businesses struggle with. And they think, well, I've got this process problem. I've got this ERP problem, this technology, this payroll, like all of these things. And I think if you ultimately distill it down all the way to the bottom, you have a people problem. Because if you have the right people in place, they will be able to work with someone like yourself to improve the processes. They will have an understanding of the processes, all of the downstream ramifications of process changes. To tie this back to your experience and bouncing around to a lot of roles, there's a tremendous amount of value in jumping functional domains because you get to see how all of these different groups interact with one another, and then you have a more holistic understanding of the downstream impact, as opposed to somebody who has just sat and processed payroll their entire life. They might not truly understand some downstream effects of changing the payroll process and what that looks like. And I think that you and I have some similarities in that regard in terms of being able to jump from, for me, it was IT to HR to safety, transportation, and then some into operations realm. But I think that there's a lot of opportunities for businesses to explore that more in depth. If you have high-performing employees in one domain, take a chance on them. If they want to grow, they express interest in growing, take a chance on them and drop them in somewhere else. And it could be a lateral move for them. And another thing that I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here is I used to think of the corporate ladder going straight up. And I've come to realize it's really more of a jungle gym, because if you go up and then come across, now you have a better understanding of these other areas, and you're able to view projects and initiatives and change through a different lens. I just dumped a whole lot of word salad on you. I saw you taking some notes. So what are your thoughts on everything that I just shared?
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
So let me think about so one thing that you said was talking about if you have the right people, then they have the vision to be able to execute against the process. And I think, so one thing that jumped in my mind around that is there's a balance, right? Because you want to have the right people, but you also can't rely exclusively on people and have it all in their mind, such that if that person wins the lottery and is gone, now we don't know how to do the process. And so there's that piece of it too, right? It's how do we have a consistent, well-documented work process, and we love a work process in DOW, but how do you have a consistent, well-documented work process, but that work process integrates and works with the people, and you have those great high-performing people that are able to, work within that work process. So it's making sure that you don't end up with all that tribal knowledge in someone's head without, also having documentation to go with it. So that was one thing that I thought of. The other thing that you said, you talked about, having somebody with breadth of knowledge versus somebody that's been in one role for a very long time. And one thing that I've come to appreciate over my career is having the balance of those people. I have jumped around from business to business. Every time I moved, I went to a different business unit, which means I have very broad knowledge of a lot of things and a lot of places within the company, but I don't have very deep knowledge. And it is a privilege when I get to work with that tech associate that has been in our plastics business for the last 35 years, because this person has forgotten more about plastics than I will ever know. And we need that balance, right? Every company, every entity needs that balance of people who want to really specialize and be an absolute expert in something, and then the people who are willing to be the generalist and be the person that connects and ties all of those super smart experts together. And so I think those are kind of two things that jumped into my mind as being, things I think about based on the stuff you were saying.
There is no best. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and having the ability to lean in and say, Julie has this wide breadth of knowledge of all these different functions and areas within the business, and then she's going to sit down with Joe, who is an expert in the plastics business. They're going to come together. They're going to share their ideas to come up with that common goal, vision, and direction for the broader team. Because I have had experience in different domains, I have enjoyed jumping around, and it's interesting because I always geek out on the technology side of things. I always geek out on the people side of things. And whenever I started leading safety and transportation, I dove in. And I learned about policies, regulations, compliance, audits, inspections, all the things associated with those domains, but it didn't excite me. And I leaned into the people on my team much more in those domains than I did with IT, with HR, and things like that. And that's a good thing. There is a phrase that comes to mind for me. It's build a team so strong you don't know who the leader is. And I love that. There would be times when we would pull in our director of safety and, hey, Jeff, this is your domain. And I'm going to have to lean on you. I need you to tell us where we're going to go on this instance. Or bring in the VP of IT. Jonathan, man, you're the expert here. I know some technology. You can't pull a fast one on me, but we're going to come to some sort of agreement and alignment and figure out what makes the most sense for the broader organization. So, I think some people have a tendency to get hung up on, well, he knows a lot of different things, but he doesn't really have a depth of knowledge in any one thing. Okay, that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. Don't take it as a dig. It's just, this is where my skills lie. These are the things that get me excited, I'm passionate about. And so bringing all of that together, that's where the magic, I think, of leadership comes into play, is being able to recognize the strengths and weaknesses of everybody on the team and then corral them and pull them together. Because we can talk about technical aptitude all day long and matching these people up. Then you layer in the emotional aspect of it, and that's always fun. But it is important to get to know the people on the team. And do you guys use behavioral assessments like DISC and Berkman and things like that at all?
We have used various ones over the years. They're often driven through maybe one of our employee resource groups. We'll do a special session on, hey, let's everybody, we're going to take this personality assessment, and then we have, a session where we talk about it. So I don't know. I think I've probably taken almost all of them over the last quarter century here.
Yeah, same. And I think it's a great tool, especially for those who are not familiar with it, because it raises that element of self-awareness. So I want to shift a little bit into the realm of talent management. We've covered all the people process side of things. Let's get into the talent side of it. And I actually have printed off some questions from a panel that you got to moderate with myself and Mervyn. And let's see here. So I'm actually going to ask you one of these questions. That's the first one that I've got here. We hear a lot about the challenging labor market, skills shortages, high turnover. What are key challenges that you have encountered in recruiting and attracting new talent into your organization or industry?
I think the labor market is it's changing, right? I mean, as I said at the beginning, I'm probably the last generation that said, hey, I want to go to work for a company and I want to retire from that company. I want my whole career to be there. The generations that are coming in are looking for, what have you done for me lately? What are you doing for me as a company that you're doing to retain me here? And so that also spills over into recruiting. It's not just about, hey, here is our company and here's the job that you're going to be doing and here's the paycheck you're going to be getting. It's about what is the rest of it? What is the employee experience like? One of the things that we have done at DOW is we've really looked into the different types of programs where we can reward employees through maybe the less tangible, through the experience that they get. We have a well-being program that all employees have access to. The fitness tracker I wear on my wrist is actually because of our well-being program. We can do little challenges between employees, which builds a sense of camaraderie. I mean, I joined one of the challenge teams that was over in Germany. I'm not located in Germany, but I got to celebrate with my German colleagues because we all completed the challenge. So we also really double down on our employee resource groups. They are not just social groups, and within our company, they are groups that drive positive change both inside and outside of our company and really support employees. So I think that, coming back to this idea of what are the challenges that we're seeing in the labor market, it's about crafting that whole employee experience for people to attract them into the company to start, but to retain them in the company as well, because they're not going to stay just because we have to keep actively making sure that they're getting what they are looking for in that employee experience.
Yeah, I love that term, employee experience. And whenever I think through the topic of leading multiple generations, I have no doubt you have heard the examples of, well, these younger generations, they just don't want to work. I'm going to challenge that. They do want to work. They want more meaning in their work. They want to know that they're having a greater impact. And that's not to say that the older generations don't want to have an impact, but they came up in a time where I go in, I do my job, I do a great job, loyalty both ways from the employee to the company and so on. Their focus is just different, not better, just different. And I think it's crucial for leaders to be able to develop skills around understanding how to lead these different generations. Again, as leaders, we have to be chameleons. We have to lead each person, each generation, the way that they need to be led. And some people prioritize compensation above everything else. Other people prioritize the opportunity to learn and grow above all else. And then there's others that just want to take 36 weeks of vacation the entire year, right? And so you have to figure out as a leader, what role do they play? Where do I need them? And can I make this work while operating within the confines of the broader organizational structure that we have in place? And sometimes you get maybe a salesperson that's a top performer and they want a massive, crazy salary. You can give it to them for a little while, but if you fall on hard times, you might not be able to, and that's okay. But we have to be able to adapt and provide opportunities or comp or time off or whatever it is that they need.
Yeah, diversity is a big tenet for us, and generational age or experience diversity, those kind of all fit together, is a part of diversity, right? It's I enjoy working with people from different experience levels. It is my privilege to partner with my learning leader who is younger than me. She's a different generation than me, and she pushes me and she challenges me, right? Because I'm like, oh, well, of course we can just make a PowerPoint for this. And she's like, Julie, I don't want to read your PowerPoint, so let's make a video. I mean, the first time she's like, Julie, let's make a video, I was like, really? I don't know if I want to do that. But now I make videos all the time. So it's, pushing outside that comfort zone and being willing to listen, right? And listen up and down the experience and the generational levels as well, right? A stronger team is a diverse team. And if we can bring in all those perspectives, the person that's worked for the company for 35 years, the person that's worked for the company for 30 days, if you get perspectives from both of those, how much more powerful is your message? How much better and stronger can you be?
Diversity is such a huge topic. Well, over the past, we'll say 5 years. I mean, it's been important longer than that, but we've seen such a massive push over the past half decade or so. And now it almost seems like, to go back to the pendulum conversation, that we're seeing more and more, at least I am, articles of large organizations that are pulling back on their DEI teams. They're having to let some of them go because I suspect maybe they weren't seeing quite the impact that they were expecting, or maybe they didn't get the right people on the team, or, there's a myriad of reasons that could be contributing to that. But I think one thing that I've observed is a lot of these frameworks around ESG and DEI, they're very focused on equality of outcome instead of equality of opportunity. And I think because this domain is somewhat in its infancy, it's going to take a little bit of time for all of this to normalize, and businesses and employees to really figure out, what does this mean? What does this look like? And it's a very challenging space, and the topics of discussion can be contentious because there are people out there that don't necessarily agree with it. They think that, okay, well, if you're going to hire somebody who has less skills and less experience, but just because of the color of their skin, how is that fair to me? Okay, maybe it's fair to this person, but is it really fair to the other person who is more competent, capable, and qualified? They've been doing it for a decade versus someone right out of college. And so this is just such a tricky conversation to navigate. How are you guys at DOW handling that?
I wondered if we would go to this space, and it is a difficult conversation to have sometimes because there's big feelings here on both sides. I feel like in DOW, diversity and inclusion and equity is not a numbers game. It is a mindset. It is the way that we think and act now. We just had our big leadership conference. It brings together both in person and virtually the top about 3,400 leaders within the company. And it is absolutely inspiring to look at the leadership slate that we have, the number of places where we have Black people, where we have women, where we have LGBTQ plus people on our most senior leadership team. It is truly a very diverse and inclusive slate that we have. And it's just, I recognize that I am privileged to work for a company that does that, and not everyone gets to experience that. But to your point about frameworks and numbers, I would say that you have to start someplace, right? It's great to say we want to be more inclusive and we want more diversity, but if all you do is say that, it doesn't just magically happen in people's brains. So way back when, 26 years ago, I remember there was a safety. So when we were still earlier on our safety journey, there was a safety professional that said something to me that has always stuck with me. And he talked about the idea of starting with compliance, which builds to commitment. So we had a safety observation program, behavior-based safety observations. I think it was actually called something else back then. It's had multiple names over the years. But you had quotas, right? You had to go do a certain number of safety observations, or you had to fill out a certain number of task risk cards each day, each week, each month, whatever it was. And I remember I talked to him about it. I'm like, why do I have a quota? And he says, Julie, the reason why we have a quota is because we start with compliance. You build the habit of doing this because it is a condition of your employment, right? You will do 4 observations a week. And so therefore I go out and I do 4 observations a week. But you know what? Eventually, I just go out and do observations because I think about it. I don't do it because I have to. I do it because I think about it. So I've moved mentally from compliance to commitment to safety. I mean, the reason why when I'm cooking in the kitchen, I look around me and I think about line of fire hazards and where my hands are and where my body is when I'm cutting something or when I'm taking something out of the oven is because of the safety culture I have at DOW, right? I'm used to looking for line of fire hazards and thinking about PPE, and I got that through starting with compliance, building to commitment. Like you said, the whole DE&I space is still, we're moving in that direction. And so sometimes we have to start with compliance. Sometimes we have to start with, I am creating intentional seats at the table for these marginalized populations. And by building that to habit strength and giving these people the opportunity to get their feet in the door and start contributing, now it becomes commitment. And I see that within my company, which makes me very proud. Right now it is commitment. As a woman working in DOW, I don't feel like I have ever been treated as less than, right? It's not like, well, I don't know if you can handle this job. It's just, I'm going to go and do the job. And I hope that, everyone in DOW feels that way, no matter what particular populations they may be a part of. But I think that's the vision that we're going for.
I love that approach. And I had to make a note here, right? You've got these quotas and compliance, and ultimately, while it can be challenging, all change can be challenging, you are driving and or incenting certain behaviors until they become habit, until they become part of the operational process of each and every person. So yes, it can be frustrating. It can be, why do I got to do all these audits and inspections? But over time, it just becomes a part of who they are and what their role and responsibilities are. It's challenging at first, though, and especially if they don't understand the why, if they don't have that leader, like you just cited, that talks them through and helps them have that pivotal moment or that understanding moment of, oh, I get it. Now I understand what we're trying to accomplish. I understand why we're trying to accomplish it this way. That makes the conversation much different. It makes it easier for people to get on board with it. So yeah, it just kind of turns into creating these habits to move the organization in a positive direction.
Yeah, exactly. I love the way that you used habit, because that was also a core tenet of our behavior-based safety program, was getting things to habit strength. So you would create your list of things that you were looking for, right? I'm looking for people wearing PPE. I'm looking for, caps on the ends of lines. And I would go look for those things. And once, I had reached a certain point where I didn't see anybody not wearing a hard hat anymore for X number of days or observations or whatever, that was now habit strength. So I put that away and I pulled something else in to go focus on, to bring that to habit strength. I mean, I would pull this one back every once in a while and check on it, but you can do the same thing with, these other initiatives, with DE&I initiatives, or with basically anything, right? Driving it to habit strength, and then you can, okay, let's focus on something else. So, for example, in our DE&I space, one place where we had a huge focus was on our employee resource groups. So we have a number of employee resource groups, and we really pushed the idea of not just join an employee resource group because I am a member of that community, but join as an ally. So join a group that, you don't identify with, because you can learn more about what their challenges are, what they need, and who they are as people, and be a better ally for them. And so we had goals. We actually had goals within our annual performance program, the annual bonus, that were around ERG participation. Leaders had, there was an expectation that a certain level of leadership, you were not just joining ERGs, but taking an active role in ERGs. And our ERGs have grown massively. And as I said before, they're not just social groups. They are groups that drive positive change and bring education in and do advocacy outside the company and inside the company. But this year, for our performance award, we actually traded it out. We took that ERG participation goal off, and we've now put a supplier diversity goal on. So we've said we're doing great in the ERG space. We're going to keep going in that space, but we're going to find something else now to focus on to take us to that next level. So now we're going to look at how can we reach beyond our internal fence line, and we can incentivize suppliers who also are embracing diversity, suppliers that are, maybe a veteran-owned business or a minority-owned business, and how can we, bring them and give them a seat at the table as well. So that's that whole idea of like habit strength and replacing it with the next thing that we want to build up.
I love the way you were able to tie this into my next question, which is, how do we get more organizations to start espousing this philosophy? And you just touched on it. Bringing in your suppliers into the fold and helping them understand, this is what we do. This is how we operate. Here is the ROI. Here is the benefit to doing it this way. We would like for you guys to do something similar. It doesn't have to be exact, but here is the value. And we would be honored and appreciate you coming in and doing something similar. So beyond that, what other ways can we get more organizations to understand the value of all of these things?
It's about the value case, right? I mean, we do DE&I because it's the right thing to do. From a people and society standpoint, but we also do DE&I, or honestly, we are businesses. We are for-profit businesses. We do DE&I because it is the right thing to do for our business. And so partnering with suppliers is one thing, but before we partnered with suppliers, we were partnering with customers, and our customers are asking for it as well. And unfortunately, I'm not wearing my Under Armour shoes today, but we had a great partnership with Under Armour with their Pride line, because we are huge supporters of LGBTQ plus equity and inclusion. And so we partnered with them on their Pride line of products, and our DOW foam goes into the soles of the Under Armour shoes. And we had a fantastic campaign. We've had similar campaigns with other people that we supply to as well. And it's finding those like-minded companies. And when we can share not just, hey, I need this product and I need it at this price, but we have the same company values, right? We value inclusion. We value the environment. We value equity. These things can drive us to better and stronger business relationships, right? And while we are business partners, we can give each other a little bit more grace when something happens, right? When a hurricane hits the Gulf Coast and I'm struggling to supply you, if we have a really strong relationship over the years and a shared sense of value, I'm going to give you a little bit more grace as you work through that plan to get supply to me. Similarly, if I have to cut inventories a little bit at the end of the year for my own things, as the supplier, I'm going to maybe give you a little bit more grace because I know you're going to come back to the table and order after the new year. So it is about building those business relationships. There is an absolute business case for DE&I. You just have to find it.
Yeah. And I think that comes back to good people want to work with good people. Good businesses want to work with good businesses. And when you have those relationships that are mutually beneficial, and while you guys focus on the foam and Under Armour focuses on the rest of the shoe and the marketing piece of it, there's so much alignment there that just makes sense. And it makes it so much easier for you to navigate through these challenging waters that are inevitably always going to unfold in life and business. So surrounding yourself with excellence, partnering with good organizations that have good people, that is the key.
Absolutely.
What is one of the biggest lessons that you have learned over the past 26 years?
So I was reminded of this here recently, and at that leadership conference that we had recently, we had John Amaechi came on. He is a former NBA basketball player, now an organizational psychologist, author, speaker. He was the guest there, and there was a conversation that they were having. And one of the things that he said was that most people start collaborating when they need something. But there's strength in starting that relationship early. Relatedness and connectedness is an outcome in and of itself. So even something like this today, you and I talking, even if we don't leave here with any actionable thing that we're going to go do, the fact that we had a conversation and we now have a connection, that was not wasted time. And when he said that, it just like this light bulb came on in my head, because I am a connector. I am a networker. And my favorite jobs that I have had and my favorite projects that I've worked on are the ones that let me talk to people, whether it's within the DOW world or at conferences and things. I recently did a project, it's been maybe 2 years ago now, but it's still fairly recent, where I got to interview, it ended up being about 350 people all over the DOW world. And I just got to, and it was all levels of the organization. So I got to talk to people in Thailand and people in Mexico and people in Argentina and people in the Netherlands. And just the idea of connecting and talking and finding out what was causing problems for them, what did they need, what would make their jobs easier. And the number of phone a friend type of requests that I get is extraordinary. And I always do my very best to say yes when somebody calls me and says, hey, Julie, I need this value stream map. Do you think you can help me with that? Or, I need to deliver this presentation on change management. Do you think you have something that you could send me? My default answer is always yes, because I want to connect. And that whole idea of relatedness and connectedness being an outcome just resonated with me. And I think that's, we all have different ways that we connect, but I think that's really important, is to just remember that it's not always about what can you do for me or what do you need from me. Sometimes it's just about, hey, let's start the relationship now, so that in the future, when one of us does need something, we're not starting from scratch.
I just love that. And it has taken me longer than I care to admit to understand the value of that and the power behind that. I was so hyper-focused on climbing that corporate ladder, and if I am the best data center architect and our servers never go down, then I'm just going to work my way right up to the top. And It didn't happen that way. Interestingly enough, not shocking now, but at the time, that's where my mindset was. And it wasn't until I started to understand the power of what you just said that doors started opening, and not just like, oh, well, now I can do this and now we can make more money. And it's not even about that. It's about coming together, having mutually beneficial relationships where you can learn from one another. You can share ideas. And then one day, next week, next year, a decade from now, hey, Julie, I ran into this. What are your thoughts? Because the impact that you have left on me was significant. And that is one of the things that I love the most about, actually, quite frankly, this podcast. That was an unintended consequence of bringing guests like yourself that are experts in what they do and giving me the opportunity to learn from them and hopefully impart some knowledge on you as well. So it has just been, I have always enjoyed our conversations when we sit on panels or you drill me as the moderator. I just have thoroughly loved it and cannot thank you enough for taking the time to come record this show with us today.
It has been my pleasure. It's been a great time, and hopefully this will reach your network and mine, and we'll both make some new connections out of it.
Thank you so much. Okay, what is the best way for people to contact you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I think I'm probably the only Julie Thyne out there, so they are welcome to connect with me. Send me a LinkedIn message, and like I said, I love networking. I love connecting, and always happy to chat with people.
All right, I appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will have all of Julie's contact information in the show notes below. If you need a speaker or someone to sit on a panel, this is your girl for sure. That is all we have for the show today. Thank you so much, and y'all have a good one.